to just step down as being the chairman of the Texas Republican Party, has endorsed secession of Texas. And in other parts of the country as well, including Colorado and the like, there are areas of the country they either want to incorporate cities or get out of their states and move in and join other states because of ideologies and changes. So, for example, one of the big issues here now is that a lot of states, we'll take California. California is perpetually in a battle to split in half or into thirds. People are in states, and those states now, to some degree, seem to be artificial entities. You know, it's somewhat ironic in that the original 13 states, say Virginia, which divided into Virginia and West Virginia, are still fairly homogenous in thought. But a lot of the states that were founded after the country was founded and formed through federal intervention have people forced into areas of the country that may not be quite alike. Oregon is a great example of this. The western half of the state along the coast and in the major cities is very, very, very liberal. The rest of the state is not. California, along the coast, down towards Los Angeles, is very liberal. San Diego area, more Republican. And then the interior of the state is also very Republican. And one side, the left, dominates California in large part because of the clout in the cities. It's a pretty striking divide that we're seeing in the country. And of course, there are people on the outside. Yes, there are the Chinese and the Russians and the like who are funding and helping seed the divisions. Now, I'm not saying that the City of Buckhead movement is Chinese backed or the secession movement in Texas or in Oregon is. No, what I am saying though is that there are outside entities like the Chinese and the Russians who further feed and perpetuate the grievances of people who are concerned about these things to try to keep the United States as divided as possible. You know, during the Roman Empire, the crisis of the 3rd century, the Romans themselves, the empire had gotten so big, they were divided up among themselves and becoming very fractious and factional. And the emperor had to figure out ways to unite the people, and oftentimes it was at war. Hopefully we won't get to that situation here, but you know, when societies get very large, they tend to become very factional. The Chinese, one of the reasons Xi Jinping is doing what he's doing in China right now is because the Chinese society is beginning to divide, not just urban and rural, but among the professional classes and others. And it has become a situation in China where the only way they can keep a country of 1 billion people together is to give them an enemy to focus on. And right now, we're the enemy. It has become a way for them to divide up China, or to keep China from dividing up. In Atlanta, Georgia, the city of Buckhead that provides 41% of the revenue for the state, or for the city, wants to break away because in large part, they feel unrepresented by the city of Atlanta. It's predominantly white, predominantly rich, and they've lost most of their police force because of what's happening in the city. That's a problem, and they're going to have to deal with it. And I would suggest places like Oregon and others, they need to deal with their secession movements and try to find common ground with people who no longer feel a part of their community or their state, as other people try to divide up those communities. Now, I say all of these things and realize there are other issues out there as well, and I don't want to dwell too much on them. When we come back, though, I'm going to be joined by Lee Habib. Lee has a new project out. He's a radio guy nationwide. It's Father's Day week, and he is working to focus on Father's Day and remind people that dads actually are important and dads actually do matter. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking to Lee about Father's Day. You know, every Friday before Father's Day, I tend to talk more specifically about Father's Day, and I intend to this year as well. But while we're getting started and while we're focusing on it, he's got this new project. In the next hour, Mike Pompeo, who was Donald Trump's Secretary of State, is going to join me in the bottom of the third hour, so 2:30-ish if you're listening to the show live. He's going to talk to me about China, the Wuhan virus. Lots of reports out there that he's flirting with running for president of the United States as well. So we will make all of that happen when we come back right here on the Erick Erickson Show. We'll see if we can take your phone calls as well, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. But right now, when we come back, Lee Habib going to join me to talk about Father's Day.
Erick Show by calling 877-97-ERIC. That's 877-973-7425.
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. Glad to have you with me across the country. Joining me now is Lee Habib, who's got a new project out with Our American Stories, and it's a movie, The Streets Were My Father. And if you've listened to this program long enough, you know I'm a big Chuck Colson fan, and his prison fellowship ministry, ministering to people who are in prison, oftentimes gets forgotten or overlooked. And it's really important, and this story just struck a chord with me. Lee, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
So tell me about the project.
Sure. You know, we do a nationally syndicated storytelling show, and on Father's Day each year, we put on the satellite our show about fathers. And into our third year, and we're now in year 5, people started to call us and say, hey, look, you're missing a certain kind of father, the absent father, or the mean, drunk father, and what it's like and what it takes to overcome that. You need to tell those stories, too. And particularly, you need to tell some stories about the redemption element. And there are some prison stories that stem from some of Chuck Colson's work and all of the acolytes and all the imitators that he spawned. Because Chuck just started a remarkable thing when he started visiting prison. Many other people did ministries, too. We heard the story of these guys in Chicago, inner city guys, 3 of them, who were ministered to a guy named Manny Mill at Koinonia House. Manny himself had been ministered by Chuck Colson. This is the power of faith, right? Minister to 1, 1 ministers to 5, 5 ministers to 10. And next thing you know, we're interviewing these 3 guys about their life, their full life, Eric, and the life of having no father or having a drunk father. And then what it's like in the streets of Chicago and how the choices these guys have as young men, because there are so few fathers in the hood. And by the way, this is not just a black problem. This is also a white problem and an Hispanic problem all over the country. So we focused on Chicago, 1 black guy, 1 Hispanic guy, and 1 who was half white and half black. All 3 had the same problem, and the solution was gangs. Gangs are where they got their fellowship, and gangs where they got their protection and their sense of belonging. And protection is a big facet of the gangs. They're being protected from the other gangs. It makes logical sense, actually, the choices they make, given the circumstances of the zip code they're born in. There are really rough neighborhoods in this country, Eric. And the next thing you know, they're being ministered to in prison in their 30s, saying to themselves, enough is enough. I want a different life, not knowing what that looks like or sounds like or feels like, and bumping into these people doing prison ministry inside the prison and understanding for the first time what love is like, unconditional love, love of a stranger, and most important, the love of God. And these 3 guys get transformed, and we watch it right in front of us. And it's just shot ESPN 30 for 30 style. It's really raw, and it's these guys alone. There are no narrators. These guys are just essentially giving us their straight testimony, the sin, the brokenness, and all the way to taking that walk with God to being a more complete and better version of themselves.
Now, some of the data out there I just find striking. Nearly 2.3 million people in the U.S. serving time in federal, state, and county jails. 85% of youth in prison are without fathers, 20 times the national average household with a father present, which is just striking to me how fatherlessness actually impacts the greater society, the cost of housing prisoners and the like.
Well, it's so true. And if you could think of one relationship to sever that could create disruption and chaos in the world, it would be between a father and a son and a daughter. And no, I mean, this is not a slam, by the way, on single moms. They valiantly try and do this work. Some have men. One of the characters in this film, the husband is in a gang, and the husband gets murdered. And the wife and the son find out Dad was a tough guy, but we didn't know he was a gangster. And it was a complete surprise to them. It rocks their family, rocks their world. So it's not a slam on the woman. It's just that men and women, both boys and girls, need a father. By the way, the data is no better for girls. They don't end up in prison. They end up with a much more likely chance of getting sexually abused. And it's crazy the more likely they get pregnant as a teenager.
Yeah, and you know, I as y'all were preparing this, The Streets Were My Father, I got the data packet on it, and just the statistics in here were striking. 90% of homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. 4 times children without a father are 4 times more likely to live in poverty. 85% of children with behavior disorders come from a fatherless home. The fatherlessness problem in America knows no racial boundaries. The percentage of children who grew up without a father in the home, 57% of African Americans, 31% Hispanic, 20% Caucasian. It fatherlessness is a crisis in the country. And I hear you saying, maybe you don't mean to, but almost apologetic, that we don't mean to disparage the single mom. But I find this very striking when I talk about this issue. There is inevitably, every time it comes up around Father's Day, this blowback of, why aren't you talking about the single mom? You're disparaging the single mom. And I'm not, but people get very defensive about it. And it's almost like people can't talk about the fatherlessness problem without making people mad.
Well, I do think we have to be respectful. Look, there is cause and effect. My wife had a father who never showed up. He not only never showed up, he never paid child support. So it's understandable that that woman and her kids don't like men, or at least not that man, that father. And so when you bring up what they could have done differently, well, she wed a man. The man seemed to think he was going to be a good father. And one day he disappears. The woman didn't do anything wrong. And so in large measure, what we can't do, especially as Christians, is judge the woman. We have to love the woman. We have to park alongside that woman and her kids and teach them. We have to mentor them and disciple them. I mean, this is a commission. I mean, to disciple people and bring them to the Lord. And it's amazing how deeply alienated and broken some of these kids are, but also how open they are to the possibility of Christ. And it's an actual mission field that's ripe with opportunity. This is why Chuck Colson was so animated by the work he did. It's in the least of these that we often find that greeting and that invitation for our souls too. Because my goodness, when we do this work, and I've been doing this kind of work for a very long time, and it's gratifying and brings you closer to the Lord doing this work.
Now, tell me about the 3 people who were profiled in here. What sent them to prison?
Yeah, well, each of them were in different prisons. They all were at Cook County at some point, and then most made their way to Statesville, which is just a giant, it's a warehouse, and it's a hard, tough place. And the 3 guys are Carlos, Louis, and Leslie. And, you know, each of them has a different story. One had a dad who was a gangster, as I told you. That was Louis. And Leslie had a father who was just drunk all the time and was verbally and physically abusive, and Carlos never knew his father. And Carlos was, I think, the most interesting character, because at the age of 19, he's been in a gang for 7 years, and he's sort of a leader at 19. And he brings in a kid whose father was killed by a gang and takes this kid in as his son. And what happens? This kid gets murdered, and Carlos has to avenge the murder. And he kills his friend's killer, goes on the lam for 11 months, gets tracked down. The next thing you know, it's like a CSI story, except it's these guys being the law and the order. And they start to talk about being in prison and how something changed. Like there was a day they woke up and they said, I don't want to be this way anymore. And then the question was, well, what will they become? And this is precisely the moment they started to make these calls out to a God. God, if you're there, help me, walk me through this place. That God showed up, a fellow inmate, a ministry program that attended to that inmate. The next thing you know, Manny Mills coming into the prison. Then when they leave the prison, Manny's meeting them at the prison with his friends and his colleagues, fellow Christians. These meet me at the gate ceremonies, Eric, are spectacular. These guys don't come out to the gate alone. And then they don't want to go back to the neighborhood they grew up in. Carlos, Leslie, Louis, it was so important to not return to the very place they were. They would go there to minister. What they needed to do was find a place where they could have friends who were fellow believers, a church that had order, a street that had order. And this was a big part of their life, the cleansing part and the healing part. And now they're all hardcore. In the end, they were hardcore gang members, and now they're hardcore evangelists for the Lord. And it's powerful to hear their testimonies, Eric. And that's what they are. They're raw testimonies, and we're never better as Christians when we're just asking people what their story is, and then when they ask us what our story is, we tell it. And we don't leave Jesus out. And the next thing you know, someone's leaning in. It's so different than trying to convert people via argument or debate. Good luck with that. A lot of people tried it on me. I didn't come to the Lord till I was 42, and it was testimonies that brought me there.
Yeah, prison ministry, it's something I'm such a proponent of, because it really does change souls and lives. And so this is just fantastic that you guys have done this. Now, if people want to see this, what can they do?
Eric, they just need to go to salemnow.com. That's Salem, SALEM now.com. The movie is The Streets Were My Father. They can stream it. They can buy a disc. I'll promise you this: if you are a good dad, have your kids watch this, because it's only in its absence that you appreciate something. And these kids are going to see, or your kids will see, what life's like without a father. And maybe this will tap something in their heart. If you have a 14-year-old son or a 16-year-old son, to get to know the kid in the school who might be a little disruptive. Maybe he's disruptive because he's angry. And maybe there's a void in his life. And maybe that void is no father. And maybe we can put a body on that kid, invite him to our home, then invite him to our church. We can do this. I think the answer to this problem is a more robust church response and a more neighborhood response, a one body at a time response. And that was Chuck's mission, one person at a time. And there are a lot of Christians in this country. 700,000 guys a year come out of prison, and we don't want them to go back.
Yeah, we don't, and so many often do, because they don't have mentors and rehabilitation when they get back into their community. Listen, Lee, worthy project. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate you taking the time. And
thanks for having me on, Eric.
Absolutely. That's Lee Habib. He's got Streets Were My Father is the documentary, and it's told first person in the words of the three men who joined gangs, went to prison, were ministered to there, and came out and rehabilitated themselves. And a focus on how dads, you really do have an impact on your kids in profound ways that shape society. And this week is the perfect time to focus on that. You can go to salemnow.com to see it and check out the documentary. And thanks to Lee for stopping by.
There's not my truth or your truth.
I'm sorry. There's a left-wing site called Fight for the Future. Here's their headline. Apple is enabling censorship of LGBTQ plus apps in 152 countries, new report finds. New findings from United States-based Fight for the Future and China-based Great Fire reveal that Apple has been enabling government censorship of the Alphabet Gang's content. Most directly, 1,377 documented cases of app access restrictions in 152 app stores around the world. Moreover, at least 50 Alphabet Gang apps, including the majority of the most popular ones, are currently unavailable in one or more app stores. Most of the app stores where the most number of apps are blocked coincide with countries already low on the list of human rights for the queer community, underscoring Apple's role in enabling this censorship in cases such as Malaysia, whose government criminalizes homosexuality, but where only 7 Alphabet Gang apps are removed from its app store, or Niger and South Korea, whose governments have legalized homosexuality, but whose app stores are within the top 10 with most unavailable Alphabet Gang apps. Saudi Arabia and Sub-Saharan Africa, they are all out there. The Adam for Adam gay dating chat app is unavailable. The transgender dating app is unavailable. Hinge, which is a dating app, is unavailable. 6 of the 10 app stores with censored Alphabet Gang content are Sub-Saharan Africa. Saudi Arabia is the app store with the most Alphabet Gang related content unavailable, followed by China. Surprise! 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 Will the NBA be outraged by? I bet they. LeBron James isn't going to go play in Saudi Arabia now because they're discriminating against the LGBTQIATTPIABCDEFG Alphabet Gang groups. Oh my goodness. What do you expect? Apple's got to abide by the laws in these countries. What is so funny, though, is in China. China is second only to Saudi Arabia in unavailable Alphabet Gang apps. And yet, the media sure is awful quiet on China and this sort of stuff. It's fascinating. Fascinating. You know, who else is having trouble with representation like is Lin-Manuel Miranda. It turns out, this is the dumb story of the day, but it actually has become a thing. So Lin-Manuel Miranda has out a movie called In the Heights. It is a musical, and it does not have enough quote-unquote Afro-Latino representation, and he's having to apologize. In the Heights creator Lin-Manuel Miranda is addressing criticism over the film's lack of Afro-Latino representation. What? Remember, go back to the Trayvon Martin stuff, and is George, what's his name? I can never remember, and somebody texted me the other day. George Zimmerman, that's it, George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was apparently a white Latino. This was news to everyone. It's like, what? What? You've got white and black Hispanics? What? Well, yes, apparently. And there aren't enough of them in this movie from Lin-Manuel Miranda. This is his apology. I started writing In the Heights because I didn't feel seen. And over the past 20 years, all I wanted was for us, all of us, to feel seen. I'm seeing the discussion around Afro-Latino representation in our film this weekend, and it is clear that many in our dark-skinned Afro-Latino community don't feel sufficiently represented within it, particularly among the leading roles. The discussion Miranda mentioned stems from a video article at The Root, which is just that off-the-wall, crazy racist site, which points out that there are no dark-skinned Afro-Latinos in the film's leading roles. Oh my goodness gracious. Leslie Grace, who is Afro-Latina, why isn't it Latinx? Afro-Latinx, and portrays Nina in the film, ended the interview saying, I think that this is cracking the glass ceiling because I hope to see my brothers and sisters who are darker than me lead these movies. Oh, good grief. And by the way, this movie is a box office bomb. I was just reading The Ankler, which is on Hollywood stuff about how what is it? A Quiet Place 2 is blowing up the box office, but this In the Heights is not doing well. If you follow the media bubble, you would assume Lin-Manuel Miranda is the biggest star on earth, something along the lines of Clark Gable, Orson Welles, and Fred Astaire combined. So it's nice to get a reminder that despite his enormous talents outside Mediaville, no one has any idea who he is. Quiz for you. Who is America's second most popular playwright right now? Exactly. The fact that he played the Dick Van Dyke role in the misfired Mary Poppins reboot and hosted Saturday Night Live doesn't make someone and someone's work the stuff of box office titanium, which makes you wonder whether Disney had perhaps known this when they steered Hamilton to Disney Plus early in the COVID era instead of sending it out to the theater. Uh-huh. And also, there's this, he adds at the Ankler. If Lin-Manuel Miranda, loved by the wokes, can get in trouble over representational issues about Afro-Latino people in his movie, what hellfire awaits Steven Spielberg and West Side Story, for whom there is absolutely no reservoir of goodwill in wokedom? Does make you wonder when that movie comes out. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. Glad to have you with me across the nation. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I have got to begin this hour talking about, well, the battle of democracy, because it has become a Democratic talking point that the media itself has picked up on, that the Republican Party is now the anti-democracy party, the authoritarian party. And I want to be clear here. January 6th was not a good thing. January 6th was not good. And it has certainly emboldened the media to take in an even more strident turn against Republicans in general. But much of what the media is doing, they were doing before January 6th. January 6th was bad. January 6th was the incursion into the Capitol. Some people just tourists wandering in. Oh, everybody else is here. We will be too. But there were some people with malicious intent. And it was not Antifa, contrary to the mythology. The truth matters here. The media is using that to claim that the Republicans are anti-democracy, authoritarian, totalitarian. The problem is that the media was already doing this. You know what this reminds me of? Honestly, it's like, remember the Bill Maher commentary in 2016? Bill Maher on what is it? Real Time on HBO. You would think I could immediately recall that, considering I'm on the show. So in 2016, Donald Trump is running for president of the United States. And Bill Maher goes on TV and basically says, listen, guys, I know we told you Ronald Reagan was a racist and he wasn't. And I know we told you George H.W. Bush was a racist and he wasn't. And I know we told you Bob Dole was a racist and he wasn't. And I know we told you George W. Bush was a racist and he wasn't. And I know we said it about John McCain and Mitt Romney, but this time we really mean it. Oh, by then it was too late. With Donald Trump, he's an authoritarian. He's an authoritarian. He's not going to leave office. He's not going to surrender. He's not going to give up power. He's not going to go. He's never going to do it. And, well, he's the former president of the United States now. January 6th was not good. January 6th was bad. But he's gone. And a lot of people who would otherwise be predisposed to think, yeah, maybe there's an issue. Well, the media has been after the whole nonsense for so long that the Republicans are anti-democratic and only the Democrats are pure and virtuous. Well, people don't buy into it. And now there's this idiocy from Chris Cillizza, who is Chris Cillizza doesn't give you the conventional wisdom. He only gives you the conventional wisdom hot takes that are always wrong. He's not a very bright guy. He used to be at the Washington Post. He moved over to CNN, and he's just not a guy that you should ever listen to in politics. And the funny thing about Chris Cillizza is that people on the left and the right agree that Chris Cillizza is not really someone who speaks with credible authority, and yet he tries, and CNN continues to pay the guy. Because when Chris Cillizza talks about conventional wisdom, it's almost always inevitably what the left is thinking. Rand Paul, he writes, has a very interesting view on American democracy. He's not a fan. Quote, the idea of democracy and majority rule really is what goes against our history and what the country stands for, the Kentucky Republican senator told the New York Times in a story published Monday. The Jim Crow laws came out of democracy. That's what you get when a majority ignores the rights of others. So, what? This is, again, Chris Cillizza writing. Paul's point, I think, is that the rights of the minority party in the Senate are sacrosanct because we have a representative democracy where people elect representatives to cast votes on policy rather than a direct democracy where people decide the policies they want. Paul means to argue that because people elected to have members of Congress represent their interests, they inherently believe the simple majority rule was not the best answer, and therefore the current obstruction of Republicans in the Senate is entirely in keeping with the founding principles of America. Paul's view echoes those expressed by Utah Senator Mike Lee, an ally of the Kentucky Republican last October, who said democracy isn't the objective. Liberty, peace, and prosperity are. We want the human condition to flourish. Rank democracy can thwart that. By the way, Paul and Lee are going about it all wrong. Blah, blah, blah. So for starters, democracy is not solely about majority rule. It is about the right of citizens to have a free and fair say about the way in which the country they live in is governed. that usually takes the form of representative democracy, including one chamber where majority rules and one where a single senator has the ability to slow or stop through the filibuster. You know what? This is where he goes off the rails here. Democracy is about majority rule. Jonathan Chait at the what is it? New York Magazine is also on this, attacking Rand Paul and Mike Lee. Jonah Goldberg in his book Liberal Fascism made a fantastic point that the left never needs to have knowledge of history. They don't have to worry about history. And I think it's true they don't. They can ignore the founding. The founders of this country did not like democracy. And I'm sorry if you think they did. Now, there will be people who quibble with we're a republic, not a democracy. The truth is that by the time the founders were around, it was the Roman Republic that was idealized, and the Republic versus the democracy. Now, Rome and Athens had democracies, but the Greek democracy was a direct democracy of the people, and it was chaos and could be madness. The Roman Republic was their form of democracy, and it was representative. People elected others to go to the Roman Senate to act on their behalf. It was different. Now, when people, and it's always people of a certain stripe, typically with old people smell, who complain about democracy versus we're not a democracy, we're a republic, we're a republic. They don't really know what the hell they're talking about. It just sounds good to them, and they heard other people say it, that they've got to spare me the ad. Don't at me on that. Don't lecture me on that. And again, here I've got to do this again. And I got a hate mail from someone who missed my entire point on this. And I got to do it again. And he's still listening to the podcast, I'm sure, but I'm going to do this again. Do you know why we say person? In Christianity, you say person, the three persons of the Trinity. Here's the problem. And this summarizes the argument over democracy and republic. By the time the Roman Empire got really big, you had problems. You had an Eastern Empire and you had a Western Empire. And the Eastern Empire largely spoke Greek, and the Western Empire largely spoke Latin. And guess what? They're separate languages. And they have similar words, but they mean slightly different things. Democracy in Greek tended to be direct. The people all got together and decided things. In Rome, a democracy was actually translated. The Roman word was republic. And in the Roman Republic, it wasn't direct. It was representative. And they largely meant the same thing, the people acting, but in Rome, they had a separate counterpart there of representation. So the words were becoming chaotic. And you had in Christianity these huge debates where the western half of the empire, by then with Constantine, would trot over to the eastern half of the empire where everybody spoke Greek. And they had a lot of words, and they kept arguing over the meaning of words. And they settled on the description of the Trinity with person, persona, because the Greeks and the Romans had the same freaking word. It was like the only word they shared in common, roughly, was the idea of the persona. Now, they were pronounced in different ways, but what it meant, what the word meant, was an actor on a stage who had masks, and he would put on different masks and become a different character. So you had one person on stage and he had three masks, one for the Father, one for the Son, one for the Holy Spirit. Now, I have to stop here because somebody got really angry with me a couple of months ago when I pointed this out. And they sent me a long email. I mean, an email longer than emails I get from my mom, or text message I get from my mom, on modalism and how I was leading people astray on modalism. I'm not talking about that, nerd. I'm not talking about modalism. I'm not talking about where God is the Father and then he becomes the Son. No, I'm talking about a word that the Romans and the Greeks together in the early Christian Roman Empire could agree on because they shared the same damn word for the same thing, an actor on stage who puts on different masks. And they could then use that as an illustration for the Trinity in both the eastern and the western halves of the empire, where they shared a common word that meant the same damn thing, and everybody knew what it meant. And so then they could go off and explain the Trinity. Well, it wasn't modalism, but it was a good representation. Man, the things some people get hung up on when I talk about this stuff. But the point that I was making then that I'm making now that isn't about modalism and heresy is that the Romans and the Greeks spoke different languages, and similar words meant slightly different things. And when people start screaming that we're a republic, we're not a democracy, well, yes, but the Roman word republic in Greece was used democracy. The Greeks interpreted republic as democracy, and the Romans interpreted democracy as republic. And it operated slightly different in different parts of the west and the eastern part of the empire. And when people bluster about, we're a republic, we're not a democracy, yes, technically, the founder's image was of the Roman Republic, which was a what? Representative what? Democracy. Spare me your lectures, because I'm right and you know it. But the Romans did have a representative democracy. They had a republic. And the founders were infatuated with the Roman Republic. And through the Enlightenment, the Roman Republic became idealized, and they embraced it. They were deeply fearful of majority rule, which was represented by the Greek concept of democracy. And so they divided the republic into vertical and horizontal federalism. The states fought with each other and balanced each other out through that fighting. The states and the federal government fought with each other and balanced each other out through that. And then the houses within Congress balanced each other out. And then the three branches of government balanced each other out to resist majoritarian impulses, because to the founders, the majority impulse was represented by what word? Mob. Mob rule. Now, Rand Paul and Mike Lee are correct that direct democracy is bad. Democracy itself, the founders did not like, because they viewed it as the Greek word for direct democracy. They liked republic, which was representative democracy, but also they wanted to balance people out. They wanted to balance branches of government out. They wanted to balance the Congress out between the states and the people. They wanted to balance the states out themselves with the concept of horizontal federalism. They wanted to balance the federal government and the states out with vertical federalism. They did not trust rule by the people. That's why the president of the United States is not direct elected. That's why the Electoral College exists, to balance out the tempers and passions of the people. Mike Lee and Rand Paul made that point, and they are right, historically right. They are accurate in every detail. The problem is that the left has decided, and the media, which is part of the left now, has decided to cast aspersions on any Republican who talks about this stuff. Say, see, they hate democracy, because they've dumbed down American schools, so American school children don't know these things anymore. And so when you hear that they're anti-democrat or anti-democracy, they're authoritarian. No, they're Republican. They believe in the rights of minorities. They believe in checks and balances. They believe in slowing things down. They believe in tempering the passions of the mob. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not tyrannical and it's not authoritarian. But the media, which has just become convinced the Republicans are bad, has seized on this to claim, see, the Republicans, they've given away the game. They're even openly admitting they hate democracy. No, what they hate is unchecked majoritarianism. Unchecked majoritarianism is bad. And that's what Rand Paul and Mike Lee are getting at. You would never know that from the media, which is just insistent it's going to define Republicans by their worst impulses. And that is unfortunate. That is bad, and we should understand the game the media is playing right now. I also need you to understand the brilliance of the Eden Pure Thunderstorm system. Before I go to break, I got to brag about this. This is the air purifier we use in our house. It is filterless. You don't have to change filters. You don't have a subscription for filters. This thing, you hold it in the palm of your hand. You can plug it in the wall. You can plug it in with a USB charger in your car, in your RV, and it purifies the air. It does not mask odors. People always think, these things, they just mask the odor. No, this thing eliminates the odors. It wipes out black mold, mildew, pollen, bacteria. It clears your air. It is small. It's well designed, and you can get one $10 off the lowest sale price by going to EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. Now, if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, you will see my name on the front page. I'm going to do this for you right now. I'm going to make it easy for you. You go to EdenPureDeals.com, and up at the top, you will see Erick Erickson, and you click on Erick Erickson. You see Eden Pure OxyLeaf 2 thunderstorm air purifier. You order one, you get $20. Oh, look, $20 discount if you buy 3 or more. Wow. But you click on it and you order it. And then when you go to checkout, go to your checkout code. You will see an offer discount code. And you put in Erick and you click apply. And you will get an incredible discount. You will. $10 off the lowest sale price at EdenPureDeals.com. Clean the air in your house. Don't mask the odors. Get rid of the odors with the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. EdenPureDeals.com.
Honest news and conservative.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. Delighted to have you with me. The bottom of the hour, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is going to join me. A lot of suggestions he may be angling to run for president. Possibly so. We need to talk about a secret weapon the Republicans have. This is from the New York Times. President Trump mentions it in private calls. The White House reads its work. And Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, teams up with its leaders for news conferences, blog posts, and legislation. The embrace of data for progress by the highest ranks of the Democratic Party is a coming-of-age moment for a left-leaning polling firm and think tank that is barely 3 years old. This week, legislation that was championed by the group and that would pour nearly $250 billion into scientific research and development passed the Senate. Earlier this year, Julian Brave, Noise Cat, that's the real name, Vice President of Policy and Strategy, led a successful campaign to nominate and confirm Deb Haaland as the first Native American cabinet secretary. Part of the group's early success reflects the Democratic Party that shifted to the left during the Trump era, but it also signifies the maturing of a new generation of liberal activists who are grappling with how to wield political power when they're no longer the opposition. For Data for Progress, the strategy is Politics 101. Politicians like policies that are popular. Their secret sauce here is that we've developed a currency that they're interested in. Sam McElwee, the executive director of the group, says we get access to a lot of offices because everyone wants to learn about the numbers. The big secret, polling data that's targeted, cheap, and fairly accurate. Except it's not really. This is the group that showed the Democrats For the People Act has 75% Republican support in West Virginia. Does anybody really believe that? This is a group that time and again has shown major Democratic policies as popular and convinces the Democrats to pursue them, except a lot of the policies really aren't that popular, and you don't have to have a polling firm to do this, to show it. This is for example, a federal takeover of healthcare, universal healthcare. Polls very popular with this group. It's one of the things they want. The problem is that they're the only pollster who shows that it's popular, and it often has to do with how they structure the question. And yet the Democrats are going all in on this group's data, and the problem for the Democrats is they are going to be misled because of what this group is telling them, which is in and of itself a fairly striking thing. The Democrats have gone down the data rabbit hole with a group whose data may not actually be the best. I mean, Republicans, for example, know because they see it on the ground that critical race theory is something deeply unpopular, but the Democrats have polling that suggests it's actually pretty popular when most people don't even understand it, but the ones who do are fired up and angry about it. They're going to go down a rabbit hole and get beaten by the Republicans because they're believing a charlatan pollster. That's not a bad thing for the GOP.
Eric's daily email by texting SHOW to 33777.
Welcome back. Broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia, it is Erick Erickson nationwide. The phone number 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Joining me by phone is the 70th Secretary of State of the United States of America. He served in Congress and then in the Trump administration, Secretary Mike Pompeo. Welcome. How are you?
Eric, it's great to be with you. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well today also.
I am. Now, I got an email from you this morning. It says, join the conservative cavalry, and you're starting a new organization, CAVPAC, the Champion American Values. And I'm glad to be able to talk to you about that. And, there's a lot I want to talk to you about.
Well, that's all great. I've been working since I left the administration to build out a team to go work to get good conservative candidates elected all across America. It harkens back to my days as a CAV. That's how we got CAVPAC when I was a young lieutenant patrolling the then East German border, where we were the alarm bell for making sure that we were prepared to meet the challenge from those who wanted to undermine Americans. So that's what CAVPAC is going to do. We'll ride to the sound of the guns. We'll fight. And I want to lead that. We're going to help out in legislative races all across America. We've got some city council races, if you can believe it, Eric, where there's really bad stuff going on in these cities that we think we can help. We want to energize conservatives all across America, and in November of 22, just be enormously successful.
You know, it's funny you say that. This morning when I started the show today, I was talking about Jeremiah 29:7 is my favorite verse in the Bible. Seek the welfare of the city in which you're in exile. And so many people focus on Washington and like, what about your city council, your school board, your county commission? God bless you for engaging at that level.
Eric, you know this. There's real impacts on how your family lives, what your community is like, how effective your sheriff's office is in your county or your city police force, wherever you may be. I come from South Central Kansas. Those are the things that make up the daily lives of most people in Kansas who are just trying to work and go to church and take care of their family. Lots of real big challenges to those places. They often don't have the resources that they need, and we're going to go try and find a handful of spots where there's something that's of real scale and importance going on, and try to weigh in and make their community just a little bit better.
Now, I really do have a number of things I want to talk to you about. Let's start with the top shelf issue of China and the virus. You maintained all along that it just made sense that the virus probably came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. What's his name? Jon Stewart was on the Colbert Show last night and made the point that if everybody in Hershey, Pennsylvania gets covered with chocolate, you don't blame a pangolin. You probably go look at the Hershey chocolate factory. And in Wuhan, China, we're like, we've got an institute that studies COVID, and people are like, maybe it didn't come from there.
I love that Jon Stewart's finally on the side of logic here. That's what that's what we were doing here, Eric. This wasn't about politics. This wasn't about anything other than trying to get the science and the data right. Every piece of data we turned up, much like the chocolate factory, we had if it was Hershey, we had scientists get sick for eating too much chocolate. Right? We know an awful lot about what transpired here, and the cumulative weight suggests that this virus did come from the laboratory, and that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want you and your listeners to know that, and that's really dangerous for lots of reasons. Not the least of which is that lab is still up and running, and it could happen again. And next time, not 3 million, but maybe 30 million people could be killed. We've got to get this right.
Well, in trying to get it right, it does seem like China around the world is not just using soft power, but it's buying up access to mineral rights, controlling ports, making easily defaultable loans to countries where then China gets to exert its clout. And it seems almost like it's using its checkbook in ways we used to do against the Soviet Union, but now it's doing it to us around the world.
Definitely the case. It's a country with 1.4 billion people, big economy, and now a large military supported by that big economy. A lot of that economy came, frankly, Eric, because we were asleep at the switch. We let them trade in ways that destroyed jobs here all across America, and they were able to steal some of our best technology and then build those products with that technology and then sell them back cheap here in the United States because they didn't have to do the hard work of investing and inventing. We tried to begin to turn that tide in the 4 years of the Trump administration. There's an awful lot more work to do. This economic challenge is different than the Soviet Union, but the threat to the to our way of life here in the United States is no less severe.
Now, Joe Biden, of course, has gone to Europe and is struggling in his questions about Vladimir Putin and whether or not he's still a bad guy or not. And I pointed out yesterday on my radio show that the Trump administration's tone towards Russia always was softer than Obama's, but was always far more aggressive in dealing with Russia than the Obama administration ever did, from shutting down safe houses, booting diplomats from this country, engaging them around the world. And it seems almost like the American media and the Democrats have decided, let's talk tough and do nothing on Russia, where the Trump administration talked diplomatically but was tough on Russia. And now we're back to this not really knowing what to do with them.
Well, I'll take that as a point of pride, because my vision for diplomacy is this is quiet stuff. But in the end, one needs to make clear one's intentions through the actions that you take, not through just the words that you utter. That's dangerous, Eric, when you have leaders out using harsh language like he's a killer, but then acting in ways that are inconsistent with the words you use. Vladimir Putin will drive a truck through that weakness, and others will watch too. The Ayatollah in Iran, Xi Jinping in China, they will watch. Chairman Kim in North Korea. They will see that the rhetoric exceeds the willingness to act. That creates an enormous gap that others and our adversaries can put us at real risk. We can't let that happen. We should be clear about the things that matter to America. We should be well defined about the things we're prepared to do to defend those interests. And when we're not, we should make clear there's places that we're going to have to find an accommodation, figure out how to work together. It's certainly what we tried to do with Russia. It meant we ended up being pretty darn tough on them. We tried to find places we could work together, but Vladimir Putin kept engaging in malign activity, and we kept imposing costs as a result of that.
Now, I got to be careful how I approach the subject with you, because I know it can border on conspiracy theorizing, and I don't mean to. But if I take the intelligence reports in the country as fact from 2016, not that the Russians and outside groups wanted to elect Donald Trump, but that they wanted us to turn on each other and fight over the election, it seems like we get to a point now in this country where we've got an aggressive left in this country that is peddling deeply divisive rhetoric through race theory and the like. Antifa marching through the streets of Portland, Oregon. You've got the Kenosha, Wisconsin situation. It seems that if outside agents could try to turn America against each other in the election in 2016, they could do that even now. And that there are propagandistic outfits. I mean, we know the New York Times and others have continued to take money from the China Times, which is a CCP front organization. It just seems like maybe it's plausible they're running propaganda campaigns still in this country to get us against each other. Is that too out there?
It's not. I wouldn't even put that in the near conspiracy bucket, Eric. It's absolutely true. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party information campaigns, they call it its United Front. Its information efforts, external to their country, now internal to ours, are real. You talked about it in terms of our media. They have certainly got their economic claws inside of American media, but it's also in our other big important institutions, inside our tech companies, inside our universities and schools, even down to K through 12. This is a full-on onslaught on the American way, and this is Xi Jinping's theory. It's very much in line with the historic theory of Marxism. It's this theory on how you can undermine the West. It is not predetermined that the West will decline, Eric. I believe we won't, but it's going to take real leadership pushing back against these Chinese efforts and Russian efforts, and frankly, efforts that are from some inside of our country that want to undermine the things that have made America so exceptional.
Now, let's shift even more domestically here. You were in Congress before you went to the White House. You represented Kansas, and now you've got the great divide in Washington over infrastructure and spending, massive multi-trillion-dollar debt and deficit, and the Democrats now have decided everything that they want to spend money on is infrastructure. How do you, in CAVPAC now, your new organization, how do you take on those big issues, particularly when over the last number of years Republicans themselves have kind of been free spending?
Yeah, guilty as charged in terms of the absence of the capacity to prioritize and spend your federal dollars that come to Washington, D.C. in a way that yields good outcomes. The deficit has grown every year. We've got to get this right. What they're doing now, however, the next, $2 trillion, $4 trillion, $6 trillion is bad on top of bad. CAFPAC will certainly have a component which talks about the real impacts, the real costs associated with this. I actually think the Republican proposal is pretty good. For my taste as a conservative from Kansas, it's probably too big as well. But if you're getting real roads and real infrastructure and you're creating value, then there's a justification for it. If you're talking about using the word infrastructure to include things that no ordinary citizen would consider such, that's a really bad idea. And you can see it already playing out in the inflation that is hitting the pocketbooks of ordinary Americans all across the country.
Yeah, I'm worried now about inflation and where this goes. All of a sudden, I guess last month, retail spending declined, lumber prices all of a sudden plummeting again, and it just seems like we're not on good economic ground right now. And I guess it comes back to Republicans, although they may have been fairly free spending as well, always kind of understood the way the economy works, and Democrats really do at this point just think you can just print money and everything will be hunky-dory.
You had to kind of come full circle. I've seen reporting this week that kind of been a party with the G7. Everybody really likes President Biden. It shouldn't be surprising. The Biden economic model looks and feels much like a European socialist state, right? People work less, more federal spending, more dependence on government. That's a model that the big German economies know well. They're not surprised that they find a brand in the progressive elements of President Biden's economic plan. It's not America, though. It's not the innovative country we know. It's not the federal system that we love. It's not consistent with the way America has always been the leading country for building out the next great idea in the world. If we adopt the European model, we'll be less vigorous. We'll have a smaller economy. There'll be less prosperity. And most importantly, we'll have lost the bubble of the things our founders knew made our country so special.
All right, last question, and it actually relates to this, believe it or not. You were the director of the CIA. So your thoughts on UFOs would be appreciated.
My son asked me when I became the CIA director, he said, the first file I want you to turn over is the UFO files. Help us out. I didn't do it for him. I can't do it for you today either. We need to make sure we know. We need to make sure we know what's going on out there, but I can't share much with you today, Eric.
I understand that, but this actually does get back to the debt and deficit. Is it possible that other countries maybe have leaped ahead of us technologically while we've been squabbling here and the Democrats wanted to cut the defense budget, and now we're having to cut corners and cut money and maybe can't make the technological leaps we need to stay as the greatest military on the planet?
It's very much a risk if we don't get it right, invest in our military and the technologies that surround it. It is certainly true that the Chinese and the Russians both have advanced weapon systems that are beginning to truly close the gap with us. We can't let that happen. It needs to happen, and we just simply got to get it right here at home. If we get it right at home, Eric, all these threats from abroad will pale with respect to protecting our republic. But we can't keep the silliness in our schools, and we've got to invest in the things that make sense for American national security.
Is there a chance they've closed the gap and gotten ahead of us and we just don't know it?
It's not very likely to me. I think we have a pretty good understanding of what they can do and what they can't do. I can't say a whole lot more about that, but I'm pretty confident that we understand their capabilities at a pretty sophisticated level. I will tell you, if you ask military leaders, most senior ones, they will tell you that gap is much smaller today and narrowing, and it concerns them greatly.
You are very diplomatic. I can see why you were Secretary of State. Listen, thank you for this. Thank you for stopping by. Best of luck to you in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Eric. So long. Have a good day.
Thank you. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the 70th Secretary of State of the United States, who very diplomatically threaded the needle on the UFO answers, no less. Always a pleasure talking to him. Obviously, lots of rumors about him wanting to run for president. They existed even during the Trump administration. He was a good congressman from Kansas, great director of the CIA, and obviously a fantastic Secretary of State. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. Notable news. He's engaging down to the city council level, something people on the left-wing activists have been doing, but very few on the right have been doing.
Well connected and well
prosecutors, left-wing prosecutors around the country, backed by left-wing groups like Soros Money, deciding not to prosecute criminals. San Francisco is probably the most notable of this. The San Francisco DA, who is also like the godson of Bill Ayers, the Weather Underground terrorist, decided not to prosecute the black men who were engaged in anti-Asian violence, in large part because he viewed them as suffering from white supremacy or something. It's a very bizarre guy out there. And now there's a recall effort because crime, even for San Francisco, crime is now out of control. One of the things that the left-wing groups out there also did is they decided to get rid of shoplifting as a felony if it was less than $900. And so lots of stores are closing in California. In the San Francisco area, CVS's and Walgreens are going out of business left and right because the shoplifting is so prolific out there. And you don't have DAs who want to prosecute this stuff because of the left. So it's very notable for Pompeo, the Secretary of State, to acknowledge that there may be some outside influence shaping these conversations in this country. If you want to hear my interview with him, if you get the podcast, you'll hear it. Or if you want to hear just that, text the word Erick to 33777, ERICK, and I'll send you back the link to the Pompeo conversation.